All right, John. Good evening. Welcome to this regularly scheduled meeting of the Marquette Township Board for Tuesday, October 21st, 2014. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask that you all rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk, retire roll call, please.
All right, Trustee Pompo is absent and excused tonight. Trustee LaRue?
Here.
Trustee Truscott?
Here.
Trustee Durant?
Here.
Treasurer Johnson?
Here.
Clerk Retire is here, and Supervisor Limata.
Here.
Staff present is Manager Gerard. Committee members present are Dave Wiegand from Roads, Planning Commission, Recreation, and John Marks from ZBA.
The next item on your agenda is the consent agenda. As you know, the items on the consent agenda do not typically require immediate board action. This evening includes approval of the prior meeting minutes of October 7th. Also, draft election committee minutes of October 7th, the roads committee minutes of September 2nd, and draft minutes for October 7th, the September 2014 sheriff's report, the September 2014 fire marshal's report, and bills payable in the amount of $221,918.84. Are there any items on the consent agenda that any board member wishes to remove for further discussion? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll make the motion to approve the consent agenda.
Support.
Motion and support. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. The next item on your agenda is approval of the remainder of the agenda. Are there any items that any board member wishes to add for further consideration? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved. Support.
Motion and support. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. This will bring us up to public comment. Those members of the public wishing to make comment may do so at this time. First and last name from the podium and your address, if you would, please.
Is it on? Yeah, it's on.
Okay. George LeBlond III, 115 Wyland Drive, Marquette Township. Appreciate the opportunity tonight to talk to you. I'm representing the Marquette County Veterans Alliance. It's an organization we started last December to get all the veterans organizations together and try to support our fellow veterans. But in addition to that, we've done a couple things. One is we're trying to maintain a van for the DAV, which is run back and forth to Iron Mountain. But the second most important thing really at this time is try to get a proposal passed, a special millage for the November 4th election. That millage is trying to get approved is to develop a Department of Veterans Affairs department within the county. We're the only county in the UP that does not have one, and we're one of only 12 within the whole state of Michigan that does not have a Department of Veterans Affairs. With the Department of Veterans Affairs comes a county counselor. County counselor would basically do all veteran support activities to take care of the veterans and families, but it would also provide some of the assistance and sort of a joint effort along with the county benefits as well. And it's one single location for all the veterans to go to. We do have 2 veterans counselors right now. We have one for the VFW and one for the state of Michigan. But the county used to have 4 veterans counselors, so we're about 2 short. But we're also, in terms of 2 short, we're actually about 3 short, actually, because of all the veterans that are coming off active duty at this time. So we're trying to get that passed. It will be for 1/10 of a mil, and that will levy up to about $228,000. We only want to do up to about .065 this first year. That will take care of the training, hardware in terms of computers and that sort of stuff, and also hire a full-time counselor and a part-time secretary. We're probably going to go to a full-time secretary, though, so we have somebody in the office full-time to do that if we can. And our future goal is to have possibly an assistant counselor as well. And the big thing with that is just to let everybody know that if your house is a $200,000 house, let's say a taxable value of $100,000, that .1 of a mil will only be $10. I mean, it's a very insignificant amount of money, but a significant benefit for the veterans in the county. And so we're just looking for your support and people within Marquette Township as well. And I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to make public comment?
Dave Wigan, I'm here tonight for the Recreation Committee. I'd like to give the board and the residents an update on the activities over at Lions Field. As you're all aware, the board approved the contract for UP Concrete last Friday. They started on Monday. I was left there about 5:15 tonight, and they are ready to pour concrete tomorrow morning. They're going to pour some 140 yards starting at 10:30 in the morning. The concrete will be poured. They are going to cut some control joints in it. There's a little bit of volunteer labor going to be to fill the control joint cuts in, and we're setting boards tentatively. They're going to be delivered and set up on November the 3rd. We have a preliminary commitment from the Royals hockey team here in town to come out and help us with some of the labor that's needed for that. So that's where that's at. We're still waiting to put out some RFPs for the warming house, hopefully this week or the first part of next week. That's where we're at for now.
Thanks, Dave. Anyone else wishing to make public comment? Seeing none, we will close public comment, move to board member comment. Those members of the board wishing to make comment may do so at this time. Lynn?
Yes, sir. I have a couple reports. I just came from the library meeting tonight, and just give you some bullet points of what they're doing. They've asked if we're going to have a second volunteer, the one who, for the TAC committee, one that we had there were two of us, and now we have one, and they were asking if we were going to have a second volunteer. So that may be something you want to address, when you ask for help.
We said it before, but yeah, we'll put it on the
Okay.
list of volunteer committees to make sure that if there's somebody who really has a desire to go on that Township Advisory Committee for Peter White Public Library.
Okay, thanks. They are campaigning, if you will, in Marquette Township and Powell Township for the next 2 weeks before the election to encourage everybody to come out and vote to renew the millage. They're sending out information letters to cardholders. Pam Christensen, the director, will be at Powell Township Schools tomorrow for 3 hours. And, the Marquette Township people, those are the cardholders that they'll be addressing up there. It'll be just the residents. They are on the new Marquette City fiscal year for their budget starting October 1st. They had some questions for me, and we did talk, and I did have some more information from last night's our meeting about the tax tribunal. They're concerned about the $30,000 to $40,000 that they're going to be losing if the tax tribunal votes, or the appeal votes against us. They're also concerned about $80,000 approximately to $100,000 they'll lose from the hospital for their budget. They captured some funds when the hospital went for profit, but because so much of the new property will be brownfield, they're going to be losing some 80-some thousand. So they're trying to figure out how to work that in their next couple years' budgets. They have two of the employees won Friends Awards, Dominique and Pam. They were pretty proud of, from different organizations in the community. They are updating their website. They're looking for a part-time webmaster. They've just approved the job description tonight. And they're also doing, and have done for a little while, in order to collect on fines for books or DVDs that have not been returned. They're taking food, non-perishable food, in lieu of paying for fines. So if somebody has a book that's overdue 5 days, or I don't know what the time frame was, actually, they didn't specify that, but you can bring maybe a can of peaches or something to pay the fine. So they said that's been very successful, and they're not really sure exactly where the food's going, but it starts with the TV6 Canathon, and it goes pretty much to St. Vinny's, Salvation Army, and then one of the places up in Nagano or Ishpeming, I think they said. So if anybody has a DVD that's late or something, they can, bring in a bag of rice or cereal or something like that, and it wipes out the fine. They said it's been very successful. There was some discussion, I did make some copies for the board on some questions I had about their minutes, so I just made copies so you could see what was involved. It was an informational eye-opener for the library board, and they apologized to me for not giving me the correct information and have changed their protocols, and that's all I want to say about that. Then, Planning Commission, we talked about a few different things last week, and that meeting will also be tomorrow night. So from the last meeting last month, October 22nd, we will be talking about a request for mineral extraction from the County Solid Waste Management Authority. We will also be having a public hearing on November 12th to talk about another zoning issue with changing the size of a building, the building size for an accessory building. We discussed the outdoor lighting ordinance in great detail, and we're going to be addressing that. We did get a sample ordinance from the county that was a lot more comprehensive. Talks about turning off all lights at 11 o'clock p.m., which is not really practical in the township because so many of our businesses are open later and sometimes all night. So we're going to kind of pare that down and work on that. And I think that was about it. Yep. Yep, that was it. So that's just a highlight. And then again, we'll have our meeting tomorrow. So we'll have something
Thanks.
for you next month.
Thanks, Lynn. Anyone else? Diana? Ready? Quick try.
Yeah, a few items. Next Monday, I think it's the 28th or 27th, I can't remember. 4 o'clock, we're going to have the accuracy testing for the voting machines here at the Township Hall. So any members of the public would like to come and view, they're welcome to. Saturday, November 1st, from noon to 2, I will be in the Township Hall here to either issue or receive absent ballots. And then a few days later, on that following Tuesday, will be the election. The polls will be open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. That's it.
Peter?
In our packet there, from our fire marshal, Ron DeMars, the thing about fire safety program, and sometimes we sort of highlight, we get it in our packet, but the public don't realize all the special effort by some of our fire people, how much they really do, but they never get noticed for it. And I just like to bring this up about, they had 9 separate programs at the fire station, at the school, and the child care center. They had met 305 children at these different ones, and I think we should let the people know that we appreciate that. And part of that group was our fire marshal, and Mike Gregridge, Jeff Gregridge, Greg Sharp, and Tim Thomas were part of this. And it's always nice to say thank you for that, because it is a little extra that they give, and all our firefighters, they do this. Not everyone does it at one time, but throughout the year they do a lot of things that we sort of skim over the top of it. They never get recognized for it, and I think it's so important that the people know what's going on out there, and I would like to thank them. Another thing, I got a call on duck hunting down off of Granite Street down there. I got an email from the DNR. I talked to the Light and Power, Mr. Booth down there, and I basically told him, I said, I'm not a hunter, I don't understand all the problems, but we have a duck hunters shooting down at the Dead River Basin. They got trails, he said. They got people walking, people are hollering. I said, I'll have to turn it over to Randy, because I'm like a duck out of water. I don't understand. I don't know what you shoot I had to ask somebody what happens if we shoot a shotgun, how far does it carry? So I just told him, I said, I would just turn it over to our manager so he can take care of it or talk to it. But if he wants to explain it now or after on his thing, but the shooting does happen 8:15 in the morning, and you can hear it from my house, so.
Thanks, Pete.
I'd leave that up to the board. I can either address it under manager's report or now.
You
It's your
got plenty of
pleasure.
regulations down there. Be a good time to bring it up, I think, on your manager's report.
Yep.
Thank you. The only thing I really have is to first thank Dave Wiegand from the Rec Committee for his hard work and unbelievable assistance out there on Lions Field, as well as getting the information out to township residents as part of the roads committee on the road rehabilitation plan. He's been very selfless in giving his time to Marquette Township to make sure that he was available to answer questions for folks, and I do appreciate that. Also, he's a very hands-on guy, as most of you know, and he's been up to his knees in mud and dirt out at Lions Field pretty much nonstop for the last couple of weeks. Dave and I were out there as he was getting ready to stake out and prepare for the ice rink pour that's coming up this week. And we ended up having to make a decision to reorient the ice rink compared to what our plan showed. We had to turn it so that the end zones were north and south instead of east and west. And what that did is it saved us a lot of money on fill and prevented us from having a big drop-off going down to the ball field outfield, which would have not been ideal from a runoff standpoint. But as we made that decision, we called in a little bit of expertise with Chuck Oberstar, and as we discussed what we needed to do and got some feedback from Chuck, he volunteered to have a crew come over and actually with a grader and do that site prep for us. So hats off to Chuck Oberstar for donating the crew, the equipment, the labor to make that happen for us, because it saved us an unbelievable amount of time by making that crew available. And they ended up coming out the same day and working with Dave Wiegand, and we had the thing graded and ready to move forward same day. So thanks, Chuck. Appreciate your help. With that, I'll close the board member comment. Move to agenda item number 8A, new business. Consider the manager's performance evaluation. I left my copy in my office, Randy, if you.
I got it right here.
I just want to say that, once again, per usual, for his annual performance evaluation, he ends up with a good performance. The rating goes from 1 being unacceptable, 2 needs improvement, good performance is 3, and consistently performs above requirements for a 4. The overall score was a 3.12 on all 13 questions. All board members did participate and turn in an evaluation. So first off, just congratulations, Randy, on another good performance appraisal. Above a good, and in between good and consistently performs above. So great performance, and as a board, it just shows our appreciation of your hard work. It doesn't go unrecognized. I also, while we're talking about that, and I'll open it up, Randy, for any comments that you may have to the board or any board members' comments as well. But while we're on that subject, generally after we delivered the performance evaluation, we start to work on his goal setting for 2015, and I will put that on the next agenda. So per usual, Randy, if you develop your list of 3 to 5 goals that you think are important for you to work on next year, again, SMART goals, so that they're specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely. And then as board members, if all of us have those turned in before the next meeting as well, so we can all have copies of what we think should be the 3 to 5 goals for Manager Gerard to accomplish in 2015. And with that, I'll open it up for you first, Randy. Anything that you want to say about the performance evaluation that you just received?
Well, I appreciate that all the board members participated in it, and I thank you for your expression of confidence moving forward. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And board members, comment? Seeing none? Thanks, Randy. We'll move forward with the goals. Like I said, next agenda, I will send a reminder out to the board on it. Next item on your agenda is 8B, consider the former township facilities disposition. Manager Gerard.
As you all know, we've had an ongoing discussion with a purchase agreement pending completion of the Public Works facility and moving out of our old facilities fully, which now has occurred. There is a crew in the new Public Works facility today. They were working to finalize the surface of the garage floor, and that should be the last piece. I'm sorry, it's not the last piece. There's that and the sealing of the tile in the public areas, and then we should be in position at that point to have a public opening and an open house for folks to go and take a look at it. So I suspect that'll be happening here pretty quickly, possibly even before your next meeting. With regard to the old facilities, just recently, because of some court issues that were going on, Attorney Zappa, our attorney, basically put some additional language in the purchase agreement, which was delivered to the purchasers, and it is currently resting with their attorney. I expected to have that back today. It did not come back as yet today, but basically what that does is allows them to go forward and sign the purchase agreement now, pending the resolution of the court issue. So it is still positive. We are still moving in that direction, but it is now under their review of their attorney, and basically it's one paragraph that was altered.
When would you anticipate that we'll have a signed document?
I had hoped to have it here for you tonight, but it's just not back from their attorney as yet. It's a local attorney, so they are pushing to get that reviewed and finished.
Thank you. Board members' questions?
Do you have a copy that we can come in and look at?
I do, yes.
Nothing else, we'll close it. Thank you. We're going to move to 8C, consider budget amendment number 2014-09. Clerk Rattari.
Present to the board tonight budget amendment 2014-09, and that had to do with our action, I think, was it a meeting ago with the fire department in their hill removal. And authorization is requested to reclassify expenditures within the fire fund to accommodate the payment of the payment of the earth berm excavating at the fire hall for $5,250. Action was approved at the September 16th board meeting per a memo from Chief Sims. And basically, it just adjusts that fund balance within the fund for that action that we took. So I'll make a motion we approve the budget amendment.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none. Clerk Rattari.
Clerk Rattari is yes. Trustee LaRue.
Yes.
Trustee Durant.
Yes?
Trustee Truscott.
Yes.
Treasurer Johnson.
Yes.
Supervisor Limata.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Gotta love these short agendas. The next item on our agenda, 8D, the manager's report.
Say we're there already.
Kind of quick, wasn't it?
Wow.
Want to go hunting?
We've got a forum discussion, so don't start packing up anything yet. I just want to.
Just a couple of items. On the first item that's on there, you do have a printed report. First item on the local roads rehabilitation plan. I was on the radio with the Walton Mike show to talk about that last Friday morning. Did get some positive feedback from folks afterwards. One of the common questions that comes up, and it was spoken to with regard to the veterans, is what's this going to cost? And just as a general rule of thumb, I can get this unclipped. As a general rule of thumb, if you have what I'll say is an average house in the township valued at about $150,000 for assessed value, your taxable value out of that is $75,000, and this millage, 1.5, the full 1.5 mils, and that is the continuation of the .85 that would end this year, that was levied on the Werner project, plus the .65 going forward for the 15 years, would be $112 a year, basically, to have all of the roads, local roads in the township done. So if you want to look at your tax bill and figure that out, you multiply your taxable value by .00150, and that'll give you your annual cost. So, and that's what we're telling people when they're coming in to meet with us. We still encourage you to come in to one of the sessions, either Monday from noon to 1 or Wednesday from 6 to 7. Ask any questions that you want. The maps are posted. You can take a look and see when your road's going to be done, what's going to be done to it, and get your questions answered. Say again?
The other villages coming out.
Yeah, the .85 that's currently in place, that has been in place for the last 5 years, ends this year. So what the road committee is asking and the board is asking in the millage question is to levy 1.5 mils, which would be that .85 plus .65 more. Okay? Corridor Committee, you have your minutes in the meeting. Trustee LaRue mentioned the issue with duck hunting on the basin. I do have in your packet the language out of the DNR's guide, hunting guide digest with regard to regulation of hunting in the township. We do not, as a township, regulate hunting or shooting at all. We fall back to the DNR's guidelines and allow that to occur. The complaint that Trustee LaRue received that came through the BLP back to me, basically, regarded individuals that were hunting out of boats on the basin along the shoreline, duck hunting. And the concern of the residents was that they were too close, that they were potentially going to be damaging either the property, their pets themselves, whatever, or it was too loud early in the morning. Duck hunting typically happens at dawn or at dusk, and it was damaging their repose. So we did do some investigation with the DNR, with the conservation officer. Trustee LaRue made an initial contact, and I had some follow-up contact. Basically, where it results is that the area that the individuals are hunting on is open to hunting. The Dead River system is open to duck hunting outside the city of Marquette, which this is. It's just north of the city of Marquette on the basin. It is adjacent to the township. It's between the township and the Board of Light and Power. So the access is coming off of the Board of Light and Power's property. And the actual solution, if there is a solution, rests with the Board of Light and Power as the property owner. They have riparian rights. They have rights to not permit people to hunt adjacent to their property, but they do have to post the property as such. Then if there's a violation, the DNR can enforce it. So that's where it rests. It's not a township issue. It's not a city issue. The issue rests with the Board of Light and Power as to whether they do or do not wish to restrict their property. Okay. Let's see, what else was on there?
They did post it
They have posted some areas of it, but there were some areas that were not posted, and and their rationale for not posting it is it's adjacent to public trails. So they can. I have had some conversation with the representatives. They can post the area between the trails and the shoreline as no hunting or trespassing. So the trails would not be necessarily impacted by it. Community Development Block Grant, there were some questions about why we did not apply for the Community Development Block Grant. There were 5 other townships that did get some funding. 3 of those townships met the requirements of having a downtown district that's existed for more than 50 years. It has multiple. They met those requirements. The 2 that did not, Yulee Township and Ishpeming Township, I talked with their 2 supervisors, and what they were funded for was only that portion of their expenses that dealt with dealing with broken water mains. Water mains only, and it was only what they contracted out. So they did not get reimbursed for any of their township expenses. They did not get reimbursed for any of their lateral lines. Only those areas where they actually had a broken water main that they had to fix and had to contract out to have that done. So that's what they received funding for. We did not have any broken water mains. All of our broken water lines, were lateral lines connecting from the main to the properties. The only blockage that we had on a water main was one freeze-up that our staff cleared. So there's no digging involved in that. So that's the difference, and that's how they got their funding. The only other comment that I would make, and it's actually a request, I apologize for getting here late. I was at a Board of Light and Power meeting. They are having discussions, a joint meeting with the City of Marquette tonight regarding system reliability, the new payment schedule that is coming out as a result of the We Energies issues and the grid issues in the UP. And one of the things that they're talking about is their future generation capacity, which will require a substation on the south that will also affect our power needs in terms of giving us redundant power and looping the entire system. So I was at that meeting. I intended to ask Clerk Rattari to add on the agenda. We did receive today, just before I left, we received the invoice for the ice rink boards. that we need to pay prior to their shipping, and we're trying to get them here by November 3rd. The money is in the budget. The board had approved it previously. I'm simply asking for the board's authorization tonight, if you will, to give me authority to go ahead and cut that check and send it out to get the boards on the way. It's $58,500. It is in the budget. It's in the capital recreation, capital building and grounds, and we've been budgeting that now for almost 3 years, building up for this. So that's a request if the board would like to add it to the agenda tonight for consideration so we can get that sent out.
Do you have the copy of the invoice with you at all, Randy, to show the board if anyone wants to see it before we would?
I do, yes, I do, as a matter of fact. I have it in my budget book. Can pass that to Clerk Rattari. It does have the line items on there. I have spoken with Lois, and she's ready to cut the check. Basically, in your 2014 budget, I don't know if any of you have your budget with you, it falls under the capital line item, 903 capital, under line items 265 and 756. And the difference, the reason the ice boards in the ice rink are costing a little bit more is because I had originally budgeted for poly boards, polyplastic boards, and blacktop for the base. And the decision was made to switch to concrete for the base and to get laminated boards for year-round use outside. So they're a sandwich board, aluminum on two sides with the poly in between. So that decision was made through the process to change that. So that's the difference in the cost. But the money is in the budget.
Thanks, Randy. Before we move to that, are there any other questions for Manager Gerard in regards to the manager's report? Pete?
Yes, I just want to make one comment about duck hunting. These hunters were not irresponsible.
No,
They were
no.
very responsible people. They did call a DNR before they went out there. They had their GPSs all mapped in, and so they knew where they had to be. So it's just that part of it, the land is so close, and the trail's there, and it's like echo it. You know, I can hear it from my house, the shots in the morning, so I just want, it's just not everybody just going out. The hunters are not, they are very responsible because they went through the effort of calling up and checking on it before they went out there, so.
And I don't mean to imply anything other than that, because they were following the requirements and the regulations, and basically it's what we're running into in many areas of the township where you have competing sporting activities, whether it be biking and hiking versus bow hunting, small game hunting, duck hunting, deer hunting, whatever. That is allowable in the township, and as other recreational pursuits spread throughout the township, we have these conflicts. Simple as that.
Any other questions for Manager Gerard? Seeing none, Clerk Rattari, how do you want to handle the agenda?
Actually, you can deal with it under the manager's report if anyone would just care to make a motion.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve payment to Athletica
58.5.
not to exceed the amount of $58,550.
Yes, that's it.
Okay.
Lynn made the motion and Pete seconded it.
Correct. Any additions from anybody else? Any questions or comments? Clerk Rattari?
Just a comment that these boards are going to be the higher quality boards, so I think it's a good investment to get a little bit more expensive, so in the summertime, they can use it for roller hockey also. And they're a little bit sturdier boards, so they'll hold up a lot better for the future, so comment on that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second to approve payment to Athletica for the ice rink boards in the amount of $58,550. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Now, I do want to add that price is the boards, the fencing to keep the pucks in, as well as an installation supervisor and a trailer full of equipment to be on site as well. So all of the equipment to install the boards will be coming along with them.
Thanks, Randy. That motion passes. Believe it or not, the next item on our agenda is public comment. Anyone wishing to make public comment may do so at this time.
I'd just like to make one comment. This flag, American flag, has to be there, but this township flag has to be to the left of it.
Okay.
Want me to move it?
That's right, we'll get that later.
There you go. You have to pull that out.
Yep.
There you go. Good. Okay. Got it. Looks good.
Thanks, Mr. Marks.
We're official. I just want to make a quick comment about, on Tuesday evening, the zoning board of appeals met, and we elected the officers, but more importantly, we adopted the duties and responsibilities for the members of the zoning board of appeals. That's a 6-page document that is the result of about 4 years of involvement. And the document is comprehensive in that it includes the township information found in the zoning act, but it also includes all applicable information and direction from the state that's found in the State Enabling Act. It's a comprehensive document that didn't happen overnight, and it took a lot of work by people here, including the Township Board itself, making the recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals. But our township, in my opinion, can be extremely proud that we have something that is very important for members that are assigned to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Members, the planner, everybody involved with the Zoning Board of Appeals now can go to one document and find all of the direction they need to follow state law and the township ordinance as it contains information for the Zoning Board of Appeals. We can be extremely proud of this, and I thank members of the board, the planner. Dennis worked on this with the attorney and even our manager. Everybody has been involved in this. But we now have something that is extremely valuable, and I think might even be important to share with other townships who haven't had the opportunity to put together something that needs to be available to all that we ask to serve. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Marks. Anyone else for public comment? Seeing none, we will close public comment. We're going to move to additional comments from board members. Board members wish to make comment may do so at this time. Clerk Rattari.
Yeah, 2 items. I was, those minutes of the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting, since I'm now the secretary, will be in the next board packet for the, I did email the board, but they'll be in the next packet for the residents to view. It was too late for this packet. So that will be in there. And just to notice, the next board meeting will be on Monday night, November 3rd, because the election is the following night. So we could have the meeting, but several of us work on the election, and I don't think we'd have very many board members here. So just a notice for the residents, it'll be Monday night, November 3rd.
Thank you, Clerk Rattari. Pete?
Just want to make one comment about the hockey rink over there. We refer to it as the hockey rink, but it is going to be a skating rink, general skating. I brought it up at the rec meeting, and the only comment I got, just the old man saying something. You know? But it is. We refer to it as a hockey rink, but it is. It's going to be general skating for everybody. It could be mixed hockey and general skating. So, thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Ernie, anything?
Nothing.
Anna? Lynn?
No, thanks.
Yeah, I'll echo what Pete said. I think it's important to note, I thanked Mr. Oberstar for his assistance on the rink. project, but there's also the Cliffs Lundin grant for $100,000 is certainly making this possible. Without the help of a tremendous amount of volunteer labor and grants from organizations like, Mr. Oberstar's and Cliffs Lundin, we wouldn't be able to accomplish the things we've accomplished. I think that when you see our vision for Lions Field Recreation Area, there's a little something for everybody by the time we're done here. We're prepared with the kiddie park equipment as we get that graded out, and we'll be changing out. I think what you're going to see is that we developed a world-class park without spending a lot of money doing it, and that was through the kind donations of time, materials, and a lot of volunteer labor, and certainly some grants to make it all possible. But I think it just shows what a small, dedicated group of folks can do without spending a lot of taxpayers' money and end up with a world-class recreational facility that's got a little something for every age, which is what we tried to do. And while it will be set up as a hockey rink, Trustee LaRue is exactly right. That is a open skating rink, and as we move forward, if we find that we need to enforce different times for open skating versus hockey, and the Recreation Committee will certainly be looking into that and following up on it, as is this board. We want to hear it, making sure that we have it available for everybody, that it's not just a hockey rink and teams take over. It really is a community ice skating rink, and we want to make sure that's very clear. The other thing is the road rehabilitation plan. If you still have questions and you haven't had the opportunity to get in here, Manager Gerard has said it many times. If you can't make the Monday from 12 to 1 or the Wednesday from 5 to 6, staff is here and available, and they will be happy to get you the answers that you need so that you can make an informed decision. We're not trying to steer you in one direction or another. Wednesday from 6 to 7. Thank you. We're not trying to steer you one direction or another. Like we said, the road committee put the plan together, and based upon resident feedback, it came to us. We agree that this allows the residents to decide. So it's up to you folks whether you want it. If you like the plan and you want the roads fixed within 3 years, and you're comfortable with a 15-year, 1.5 mils to accomplish that, vote. If you're not sure, you need more information, call us, stop in. We'll provide you with whatever we can provide you. But we're here to be responsive, and if it votes down, we will regroup and we'll continue to do what we have done in the past, and that will be to address problem roads, taking the worst priority roads and addressing those one at a time if we have to. But we're here to be responsive to your needs. Let us know what you think. Make sure you get out and vote on November 4th. With that, we'll close board member comment. We're going to move into a forum discussion on the 2015 budget. We left off yesterday on the general fund, and I think it would probably be wise for us to pick it right back up on the general fund. We had a few members who were unfortunately delayed or absent yesterday, and we want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to get their questions asked and answered. So if you want to grab your materials, if anyone feels we need a recess, we can do that for a few minutes. Otherwise, grab your materials and we'll be prepared to go.
I'll make a motion, we recess for 5 minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and second to recess for 5 minutes to get your budget materials ready. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you.
Recess at 7:45.
We'll call the meeting back to order, and we'll start on that second forum
General fund, right at the
discussion.
beginning.
We are working on the general fund. We had gotten through the narrative basically last night, and I think you got all the way through before I got here, Randy. Is that correct?
We did. Treasurer Johnson and Diana weren't here, so I don't know if they have any questions on the narrative at all.
So we'll open that up. If Diana or
I should ask this, what questions were raised? Maybe we don't have to raise them again.
There really weren't many.
We just kind of let them read.
Yeah, there were just really a couple, and there was clarification about the attorney services, how those are allocated and where they're at under the professional services portion of it. Let's see. Same thing with engineer, what the engineer might be used for. You know, most of that is going to be for either the Lions Field Recreation Area or for a continuing trail and walkways development.
I did raise one question, Ernie. Trustee Pompo could not be here tonight, and he did ask me to bring forward for him whether the board felt it would be prudent to ask Randy if we shouldn't have included in the general fund funds set aside for an executive search firm if Randy was not to move forward as a township manager because his contract expires in December of 2015. And so, you know, as you're well aware, the contract has a provision in it that Manager Gerard does not have to let us know his intentions if he was going to seek renewal until September of 2015, I believe. And so I did throw that out last night during some of the discussion, and then I told Randy that with you guys here this evening, I would bring it back up and really place that question in his lap. I did comment last night that, and what I had shared with Trustee Pompo was that I'm not as concerned because that, number one, would be a minor budget adjustment for us if we were to hire an executive search firm at some point in 2015. It would come out of fund balance, and it would be a very minor budget adjustment for us as board members. The second point is that if Manager Gerard, if there was a lapse between if he were to not seek renewal of his agreement and before we had a new township manager in place, that, as everyone's aware, statutorily that all comes down to the township supervisor, and I feel more than capable of being able to keep the township up and running during that interim time until we had a manager in place. But I did want to put it out there, and I told Randy I would give him the opportunity to address it in tonight's meeting as well. So Randy, if you...
Last time when we renewed the agreement through 2015, I had indicated at that time that it might be, I might be looking to retire at that time because I'll be able to draw some additional benefits at that point. I don't, it's as gently as I want to put it at this point, but at any event, as it sits right now, if I were to give notice to the township, it would be at least 6 months because that's what it's going to take to go through a recruitment process. It would be 6 months. By the time you advertise and screen through applications or engage somebody to do it and then get interviews done, it's going to take 6 months. But as it sits right now, I do not intend to not ask for renewal at the end of this contract. I do intend to ask that the board consider renewing the contract for an additional term.
So asked and answered. I don't know if anybody wants any follow-up on that or not. Okay.
Question is answered.
But I want to make sure, I mean, Dan couldn't be here and had emailed it to me, and I wanted to make sure we got it on record, and we did talk about it a little bit last night, but I know neither of you were here to hear it, so I wanted you to hear where we were at on that.
One other question that was raised was under the accounting services, Ernie, and Lois answered that question. It was, why is it less this year than it was last year? And it's because of a price difference, basically, in the contract for our auditors. Under travel and conference, I'm taking, as I had mentioned previously, I'm taking a very conservative approach in the 2015 budget because we don't know what's going to happen with the tax tribunal and exactly what our revenue stream is going to be. So I've only budgeted for 2 board members and the supervisor to attend the MTA's annual conference. So that's why you see a smaller number there in the travel and conference. And again, that's up to the board to decide. But again, I'm just taking a conservative approach. Under township manager, I've identified their hospitalization, what's happening with hospitalization to us this year. If we do not change our package, if our package stays the same package as it is, the Affordable Care Act now requires us to roll the prescription coverage into the insured package, which will generate an 18% increase. So that is built into the budget, the 18% increase.
Well, when you say going to increase 18%, over and above what we're paying now for?
Correct.
Over for the drugs and that too?
Well, yeah, the drugs will, actually, the drugs are costing us very little right now because we're self-funded. So it does have to, as of January 1st, has to convert into the insured health insurance plan under the Affordable Care Act. So that's where the 18% increase comes from. And sad as it is, I'm happy that it's only 18%. The average is around 30 to 35% for the other entities that I've spoken with. So, and that has to do primarily with our history.
And as you're aware, he's budgeting at 18% in here, but the bargaining units, as was included in the contract, had the right to ask, as we did, for a reopener of health insurance only. They have executed that request, and Randy and Dan and I, unfortunately with our recent schedules, the three of us weren't able to be in one spot at the same time this week, which was what their hope was. Randy has met with them. The insurance provider has met with all employees to discuss options, has shared some of that information with Randy. And I think you've got a meeting planned for later this week yet, Randy.
We're still trying to get everything together and go from there.
I don't know.
Worst case scenario, I'll meet with them separately and then can pass it along to you and to Dan in terms of what the proposal is.
Okay. But we budgeted it at 18%. We're going to have to look at all of our options as a board to determine the direction. Once we hear what the bargaining units are looking at, we'll bring that back to the board for direction for us as a negotiating committee on where you want us to go.
Treasurer Johnson, you had asked one question earlier about the split between, for your deputy treasurer and the assessor.
Yes.
That is budgeted currently at 75-25, 75 to assessing, 25 to deputy treasurer. So if that's something that you wish to address, at some point through the discussion, certainly it's your prerogative. But it is budgeted right now at 75-25.
When I talked with you, I looked at the amount of work that the cashier secretary was moving in from that. And I've always looked at where the work is, the money goes to that position in that, and you indicated that you were covering it through the general fund and keeping the percentages the same way.
That's correct. And one of the things that was also discussed as part of the budget discussion, but kind of outside, is the potential for us doing a cost allocation study going forward and doing that for targeting 2016, and I am gathering information on that now in terms of costs, which would address that question. Under computer services, there's a $2,000 increase there. That's because we're switching from Charter to Peninsula Fiber Network, and that occurred today.
That's why I couldn't get anywhere yesterday and today.
They were doing the final cutover today to convert. So our servers are now being served by Peninsula Fiber Network. So you should see an increase in speed and more depth of service, basically. So we'll see where that goes. But let me know if you have any issues. It should be done now. There was a period of time today when they're doing the cutover that we were not out of service, but it might have been difficult to access.
Yeah, I couldn't do anything. In fact, I just told Randy, when I downloaded my email just now, it went back to the 13th.
Yeah, see, we didn't
Download it all, it just went blah, 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 blah.
We didn't realize they were going to come here today and do that. We knew the equipment was installed, but we didn't know they were going to do the cutover today. Part of it is because there's a couple of pretty bad viruses going around right now, computer viruses. They wanted to make sure that we were protected, so they did the cutover at the same time. Let's see, tax tribunal, there's a question about why the $15,000 for the tax tribunal. That is for those, excuse me, those businesses that we expect yet to file as we await the Supreme Court's decision. These are not cases that are currently being acted on. They're predictions that we have. Law enforcement, bumping it up to 80 hours from the 60 hours back to where we were at 80 hours. And that's just a straight hourly increase. There was no increase in the law enforcement budget otherwise.
How is the sheriff going to provide that retail fraud services?
And when he was here and spoke to the board, he had indicated that he was willing to establish an on-site, basically using law enforcement academy students, and he is still looking, that is the direction he's planning on going, having them be limited deputies. Uniforms similar to what you have in malls in the bigger cities. It's basically just having the presence of a uniformed person there. They'll have limited powers, not arrest powers, but they'll help with the retail fraud management in the retail outlets. Now, if there is an event that occurs, and we had this discussion, if there is a serious event that occurs and our deputy is the closest, they will be dispatched. But if it's a routine retail fraud that they need to have somebody transported, it will be the normal sheriff's patrol that will come in and do that. It will not be our deputy. Our deputy will be restricted to law enforcement activities in the township, primarily traffic enforcement and responding to issues in the township.
Are they gonna talk to the rest of this, larger stores also, Randy,
Yes.
about the same program?
Yes.
'Cause we don't wanna single out anyone.
There's really, the majority is with two different locations, but all will be part of it. It'll be essentially a new program the sheriff's department will be putting into place.
And they will give us a copy of something or explain what they're gonna do?
There will be language in our contract.
All right, good.
Sheriff's
thank you.
contract.
All right, thank you.
Let's see, what else was there? Library no longer shows in our revenue stream. That's a separate breakout, as a separate budgetary item. Capital, the 15,000 and the 903 capital is for streetlights. It's to complete our street lighting project in Trowbridge Park. We did have some discussion about the difference between the low-pressure sodium and the LEDs in terms of the light shed. So we may have to put a little bit more in there for some additional lights with the LEDs. Let's see, the rest of it was pretty straightforward. Basically
Appropriation.
carryovers from last year.
Community programs, promotions there, you talked about the 4 events are, we went from 6,000 last year to 8,000 for community events.
Correct.
The 4 events will be in there, so.
That's correct.
That's
That is to
usually-
fund the four events that the Community Events Committee typically has, the car show, community days, Christmas tree lighting. What am I missing? What's the fourth one?
August, yeah, Christmas,
There's a fourth. I'm
Yeah,
missing
there
the
are 4
fourth
of
one.
them. Yeah.
Got,
The car, the antique car, the August 2nd.
Car shows.
Christmas, and,
Am I drawing a blank?
days,
Why am I drawing a
car
blank?
show,
Four?
Christmas tree
Christmas.
lighting.
That's
Three, I thought.
Okay, anyway.
Maybe there's 4, but I don't know, I can figure it's 3.
Car show,
Yeah.
Lions,
Catch a vision.
Field Days, Catch a Vision, and Christmas tree lighting.
Mhm.
yeah, next year we'll have
Okay.
Easter egg.
Oh.
What are we gonna do about the tree, though, since they have that other place over there?
Yeah, we have to move it over.
That question has come up. The tree will be in the same place, but we're going to be moving, the configuration is going to be different. The trailer is going to be away from the mall sign. It's going to be back where it was originally, closer to Applebee's, but the dental office will be closed at the time, so that shouldn't be an issue.
And we also talked at the Recreation Committee, we'd like to have a Christmas tree at the Lions Field, right off the warming shack in the open area. I think that would be kind of nice, and maybe we can think about planting a real tree there in the future.
Good suggestion.
And that was basically the narrative, general
One of
fund
the
narrative.
things that Randy brought up through this narrative, and I just want to take the pulse of the board, he had put in under the township board an estimate for travel and conference for
Correct.
2 board members to attend the MTA conference, with the idea that being with our revenue stream under attack, and where he was cutting back to limit it to 2 board members per year. We had talked about this in prior years. The board felt pretty strongly that the educational opportunities were good for everybody, so I want to revisit that. You know, you're seeing that in his budget, and I understand the logic behind it, where we're all cutting back and everybody feels it. And I just want to take the pulse of the board, I guess, to, you know, how do you feel about that? It is in Grand Rapids this year, so Lynn?
It looks like, I don't have any kind of a budget narrative for Treasury, but it looks like the supervisor, clerk, treasurer, and manager are budgeted to go. So I'm thinking this allows 2 of the 4 of
4,
us to
right.
go, which I think I think this is one of the perks that we should expect to have from a personal growth, a township growth, and informational. I don't think that would be someplace we would cut. It's the only real thing that we do to benefit ourselves in the township. And I say ourselves from the perspective of what we can do for the township, what we know, what we bring back. I think it's pretty important. And I'm totally fine with paying for any local conferences or classes or anything, you know, to do my part in that. If I want to go to the academy classes or something, I don't mind paying for that. I think the MTA is way too important to pass up. We should all be available or have the ability to go.
Diana, thoughts?
Well, as it's budgeted like this, I mean, we could always, if more wanted to go, they could amend it, couldn't they?
Yes.
So, I mean, just because it's in here doesn't mean you couldn't amend it, right?
True.
That's very true. How about your thoughts just on the entire board, budgeting for the entire board attending versus only half the trustees? You feel strongly one way or the other?
Well, I don't know, it's nice that we all get to learn different things, and, I mean, I think it's a good thing, like she said, to make sure that everybody could go if they wanted to go, but a lot of the times before, nobody ever went.
Right.
And now, you know, everybody seems to go, but before, nobody hardly ever went, so. I mean, but like, it's always something nice to know, because you learn more knowledge and stuff like that, so I think it's good that everybody could get a chance to go,
Okay.
if they want.
Ernie?
I have it in my budget, if you look at my budget, it didn't change from the
Nope.
previous year.
You have it in
I
yours.
kept it just as what it was, so there was no increase or anything else in that, so. I agree with Lynn, I think it's an opportunity for all the board members to go because there's a tremendous amount of information that is available to you and that, and it's the only time we can get together and see everything and listen to a lot of stuff. We go to some of the local ones and that, but I think this is imperative that we have the opportunity to go and that. As Diane said, in the past, when I was on the board in the 90s, a lot of times, there's only a couple of us that went, 3 of us, that. We didn't all go, and the money was there, but we just didn't go, and that, some of them didn't want to go, and that, and I found that quite unusual when I tried to explain to them what you could find there, but they just didn't seem to make any difference to them, and that, this, to me, is, any budget is nothing more than a living document. You can change it anytime you want, and that, whether you leave it here as this, or you change it to, so everyone has the opportunity to go, it really doesn't make any difference to me, because we can alter it whenever we want to, and that too, so.
Yeah, thanks, Ernie. Clerk Terry, one way or the other?
Yeah, education's good. I don't really have a problem with everyone going. Unfortunately, this year I have a vacation scheduled, not for the MTA conference, but for somewhere else. And hopefully I'll be able to go the following year, so I will actually not be budgeting that in my budget this year for myself. So that'll actually roll back into the general fund, and if someone else would like to go, that will be for them to decide. But next year will be an off year for elections, so won't be such a big deal for myself. And then hopefully that 2016, which we have some big things happening in elections, maybe I will get a chance to attend that year. So that's my comments.
Peter?
It's not just a junket. I mean, it's pretty serious. You know, when we go down there, I put a lot into it, and I think everyone else should do the same thing, and we do. We meet different people. We discuss what we do versus what they do. We find out that we do pretty good up here, you know, and not that we can't do better, but I mean, we schedule our class sessions. We take each one of us takes so many at a time. We try to get as much out of it as we can. We bring back, we sort of report back, but I think it's very important to do that. And when they come up here, we should make every attempt, the same attempt we make to go down there, we should make the same attempt to attend the ones up here also, not just go out of town because we're going out of town, you know, because there's lots of other things. I'm not working right now. It's a little easier, but it's harder when you're working. But, you know, if I wasn't, I'd take the time off because I feel it's that important. Because what I personally get from it, because I try to set up my meetings, I go down there, I still got the list from last time. I want to know, and I told MTA already that I'd like to have a list of who's going to be there ahead of time so I can plan who I want to talk to. because over the last couple of years, I've met different people, and I want to know different things, what I want to discuss with them, so you try to plan that, so. But if we have to cut back, we'll cut back, but I mean, if you want to take 2 or 3 or 4, whatever, 1 year, and, whatever, but I think it's very important as far as the learning ability, because that's probably our only access to some of these people down there, Randy and, the rest of you might go to supervisors and they get to go and they discuss different things, but as a board member, we allow you people to do a lot of it for us. We don't get into the trenches, so to speak, and this is our only way of getting in there and talking to the people who are doing the same thing as we are, and also the supervisors, and I'm still looking for that firefighter who became a supervisor, because I don't want to find him yet. So, that's, I think it's important, but if we want to cut back, we'll cut back,
Thanks, Pete. I agree. I got an email from Dan that said he was interested in attending the MTA conference this year. He wanted that known, and since he couldn't be here today, I think it's important to put that out there. And I think Dan's sentiments would be the same as what you've heard from the other trustees and other board members, is that it's an educational opportunity. And while we operate in uncertain times, I don't think the impact budget-wise is that huge for us to include making it available for all trustees. So I think that from our perspective, you're hearing a consensus, Randy, from the township board that we'd rather see a cost savings in another area.
Not a problem. I can make a modification to the budget to accomplish that. Anticipating this discussion this evening and probably the sentiment that we've heard, Lois has gone ahead and made reservations at the site hotel, so we have reservations in place in case all board members opted to go.
It started today, right? I think I got one.
She was on the phone at what time? 8 o'clock this morning?
Thank you, Lois.
So that's all.
Mine is handicapped?
That's all done. So you do have, the rooms are reserved, so whatever you decide, I mean, if members decide not to go, we have, what's the cancellation, 48 hours? Or is it 72?
Pretty generous.
Okay, so.
Okay.
That's the easiest part of the whole thing, the rooms,
Right.
cancel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And they are working on a bus to go down. I got a meeting tomorrow night on that, so,
No cookies, though.
no cookies.
All right, I'm glad we got through that. Other questions from the general fund, and I guess we can start on one end and zip all the way down if there's any other follow-up questions from the general fund. Lynn, we'll start with you.
No, I didn't have anything additional. I was just looking, like I said, for treasurer's narrative or something. I didn't see anything other than his entry in the line item.
I believe that's all there was. They didn't change anything from last year, so they didn't submit a narrative.
Oh, okay. I just thought maybe I was missing a page.
No, the only change that you're going to see in many of these is just the roll-up from the 2% wage increase in the health insurance cost.
Well, you've been talking for 3 years about having this computer out in the lobby. You were talking about it before we moved here, to be able to access
Yes.
tax information.
We would like to, but the cost is getting to the point where you have to pay the BSNA
Yep.
for every time you go on it. Yes. We try to get around it. We can't. Now, if we go out and buy the software, which we can do that, but the software is a good chunk of dough, and then you have to pay the maintenance on top of that. So, we'd like to do it. We can do like the city of Marquette does. They do it, but they bill back to
Yep.
everyone that does it. So if you go on there as an individual, you will get billed back. No, I know, the individual can look at their own.
Their own, but any other.
The businesses go on, they all get billed back for every piece of property they look at.
Yep.
We did.
Maybe that would be worth it to those companies that are interested in, or would they can still go into the office and get that
Yes.
information? Okay.
Yes.
They'll go in the office and get it. What we try to do is save time for Dulcie and them. That's what our primary goal was in that. But I can relook at it. Dulcie and I can sit down and relook at it. We just felt the costs and everything else just wasn't there at this point in time.
Okay.
It had to be dug deeper. The cost started to show up real quickly.
I started doing that with direct deposit for my employees because they were looking at it, and I got it down to like $170 a year, which I thought was pretty cheap for all of them. And then QuickBooks puts $1 per check, per payroll. And I went cha-ching, cha-ching. So it must be the same thing.
Yeah. So if you're a business here and you want to go in and look at some properties, you would be charged for every piece of property you brought up to look at. And I know Steve Pelto was very interested when I said, I don't think we're going to charge you anything, because he was aware what's going on in the city real quick. And then I got back to him and said, we can't do it because of these costs. And he kind of smiled. So he knew what it was all about, so.
Well, you have to look at the greater good for the number of people that actually will utilize the system. Is it that much of a disruption that's for Dulcie's Day, or Janelle can assist now to, pull information out for somebody? That's a real balancing act, and I think it's a wise decision, Ernie, if the costs come down, and it's not something that we couldn't put together in a hurry if it was.
It's not in a hurry, it'll take some time to do it, but we have not seen enough walk-ins at this point to justify it.
That was my next question.
You know, and quite frankly, from a community standpoint, in some cases, that's the only time we get those folks to come into the office and interact with us, so it gives us a chance basically to talk to them about some other things as well, like the road project or Lions Field or whatever. So, from my standpoint, I kind of like having the folks come in to ask the question, because we can have a conversation with them about some other things and get more of that sense of community basically spreading.
Dulce has not had that much activity generated to cause a
No.
problem at this point in time. So, if we get to that point, then we have to look and see
Look
what
at it
we can do
again.
to alleviate.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, Lynn? Other
No,
questions?
sir, I pretty
Diana,
much had everything answered.
questions on the general fund? Ernie?
No, I think,
Secretary?
Nope.
Peter?
805 engineering, you got 15,000, Randy, what's that for?
The, that 15,000 that's in there is for that engineering work that we have to have a certified engineer for, like drawing plans for the warming hut, things such as that.
Okay.
Mainly, it's going to be Lions Field, and it's going to be working with the Road Commission on complete streets and the safe routes to school.
Okay. I think a lot of this stuff was answered the other day, with the treasurers and plowing, did we add enough for the plowing, even though we're gonna take on all the plowing and stuff like that? I've made a decision basically that we're not going to pursue that small track vehicle. We're going to utilize the dump truck that we purchased with the Okay.
V-plow on it, because we can put salt and whatever else in the back of that. We've had a rhino lined in the bed. So that's what we're going to use to do that work on the trails. I shouldn't say trails, the pedestrian ways.
will I be able to use it on that, I don't know what you want to call it, walkway or pathway on Warner Street too?
Yes, that is one of them. The designated pedestrian ways that we're putting into place, Warner Street, 492, out by Schwemmwood Park, Fair Avenues and Moran Street, those are being done by the Road Commission, but when we do the complete streets or the safe routes to school, they'll be doing that along 492, because they'll be separated from the roadway. So we'll be maintaining those, and we'll be using that vehicle to do that.
You got on there building and grounds, you got water use, electricity, and you drop down.
Mhm.
What is all that covered? What part of our operation are we covering in here?
That's here in the Township Hall. That's the portion that they manage,
Okay, all right.
which is much smaller here than it was at the old facility.
Building and grounds, do you
Hard to believe,
anticipate any new equipment coming up for building and grounds?
Not in
Don't see any.
2015. We have budgeted in 2014 to replace the small blue pickup.
Mhm.
That'll be yet in 2014. We're shopping for a vehicle right now.
We talked about lighting, extra lights. The fourth light did go over by the school.
Mhm.
It is in now, so.
And the BLP has committed to complete the rest of that lighting project before the end of the year.
Under your street signs and that's repairs and maintenance.
Yes.
Is the pole, some of the poles that we fixed, is that considered under there, but I don't see it in the,
Poles and
through
signs.
June? Through
Yeah.
June, you have no expense under that one?
Yeah,
area
there
to
have
show
been
some-
some expenses, but those are probably gonna be
So
adjustments.
very small then, okay.
Mainly what we're looking at there is if the legislation ever passes that requires us to change all of our street signs to that more high visibility. Kirk's starting to put some money aside for that.
The only other thing is on the planning overtime, we jumped up to 5,000, but I mean.
And that's simply because there's been so many,
because the meetings and
so many
that
evening meetings and that
we
that
got
we've been
going on.
having.
All right. No, that's all I had, I guess. That's it, Dennis, I had.
There's no other questions. Randy, is there anything else that you want to expound upon on your general fund budget?
Not on this portion, but we also roll several others in. We have township improvements, liquor law, those are all part of the general fund. And they're generally transfers to and from the general fund as opposed to separate budgeted items. The library is now separate. I guess I would just point out that the contribution to the library is up to $213,600 at this point.
You know what, may I ask? That just reminded me. The chair of the library board did say, what could they do? And I told him that, you know, personally, I had said before about maps not helping us, and everybody thought it was a township issue and everything, and they said, well, could anybody have any other libraries come forward and supported you or something? And then I said, not that I know of.
No,
So
nobody
they're
has.
asking now what they can do. Is there anything, or are we still just kind of waiting?
I'd love to be able to see them, Peter White Public Library, if they really want to assist. They could be at least a forefront through other public libraries across the state of Michigan, because the more noise we make with local legislators about the unfairness of the big box tax issue with the tax tribunal, the better off we are. And if the library were to mobilize with, I mean, if they want some
They're
facts and
connected.
figures from us, we would be happy to provide that information and then get them to, you know, I don't care if it's in their regular mailings or out to their card holders, to talk about how important it is that you address this issue with your local legislators, and if they would roll that out, not just from the Peter White Public Library standpoint, but be leaders for the state of Michigan, because we've gotten so many places that turned their backs on us when we were banging the drum about the
what I
tax
told 'em.
tribunal. I mean, as you guys are aware, it's a huge frustration for me, and I would love to see them, you know, it would be a nice return on our investment of $213,000 in the amount of money that we're sending to the library, if Peter White Public Library was willing to work with us to head that up across the state, because the more we pound local legislators about how important this is and how the impacts are far-reaching, you know, they haven't heard anything about libraries. They just know that, you know, we've complained that, you know, the big box tax tribunal issues are now moving into the strip malls, into residential multifamily unit housing that we're being challenged on. The ripple effect is far and wide, but the library folks are really good at getting out to vote, and they might be really good at getting out the letter writing campaign to
I'll call
pound local
Diane
legislators.
and
So
talk to her.
that would be awesome. We would love to meet with them to try to see if they'd be willing to spearhead that. If they were able to transfer that across the state of Michigan, think of the impact that could be if every library sent out something or had things posted up inside, or when they do their mailings, ask folks to write a letter to your local, here's your, you know, for Marquette County, here's who we represent, or, you know, and all the other libraries, like, here's our local legislators. Please send a letter out and let them know how unhappy you are that you're cutting funding to local libraries.
She asked me if any of our representative legislators were doing anything, and I said yes, that Keevala and Casperson had tried to, you know, introduce some bills, and they'd kind of fallen away, and then they rewrote them and stuff, but
Yeah, they're working with Marquette County now, and they're, you know, they're trying to rewrite it, but they're sitting at the table with the Michigan Chamber, which,
chambers are against
you know,
it.
the chamber's writing the legislation on how much they're willing to pay. You know, I think, I don't hold out a tremendous amount of hope of where that legislation is going. But the more pressure we apply, it makes it a lot harder for the local legislators. If you start to inflame these folks when they have their town hall meetings and there's 25 library patrons out there saying, why are you allowing this to cut funding to our local library? These guys start to say, whoa, 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 the more pressure we can apply across the state, the better our chances are of winning, whether it's in the Supreme Court. Even if we prevail in the Supreme Court, we still have to have a legislative solution.
Right. Well, they were turning their heads when I said, the people who have already fought this in Briding Township, this is it. They've capitulated and they're stuck with this. And they all kind of looked at me. I said, this is it. Going forward, if you got a $100,000 property, you might have the value of $25,000. If it's a quarter, if that's, it'd be $200,000 because it'd be half. But I said,
50%.
think about this. This is serious
Yeah,
stuff.
once
So I will
you-
definitely call her.
Once you stipulate, that's it. It doesn't come back up. And that's where our biggest thing is why we've been trying to do the high-low with everybody. So rather than have to hire and get a professional appraisal done and then go and fight it toe-to-toe and hire an attorney, we've gone to everybody who's challenged us and said, hey, based on our Supreme Court case, we're willing to stip high-low and let's see if we can find a happy medium so that we don't have the expenditure of the legal expenses of representation and the professional appraisal expenses. Because once you've stipulated, if we did it all based on, let's wait for this thing to get finished in the legal process. Then once we know that, then we'll sit down and we'll be able to figure it out. Smaller communities or people who are much more cash strapped who just couldn't even conceive of fighting it, just stipulated. They said, you know what, we're gonna lose anyway, and that's, basically Shapiro's attorney firm comes in and says, you're gonna lose. Here's the precedent. We've won every single case before the tax tribunal. You guys really wanna hire an appraiser and hire an attorney to come down here and fight us? Then what, you're gonna appeal it? You know how much that's gonna cost you? Just stipulate to the 25 bucks a square foot and let's get it over with. These people have said, you're right, we can't afford to do it, I'll stipulate. It's gone forever. You can't fix it. Unless even if we prevail in the Supreme Court, maybe there'll be
They've
some kind
lost.
of a challenge, but,
Even then, that's years down the road.
right. And could they afford to even challenge it then? I mean, unless there's a legislative solution that comes up with a fix, those people have lost it. So some of that's already been stipulated to. What's been given up has been given up for good. It doesn't come back.
What people don't realize is that they didn't connect the dots between companion legislations. Basically, what Supervisor Lehman is referring to is that Proposal A, that everybody was anxious to get passed, limits how much you can increase your taxation per year. And when they stipulate to that lower level, Proposal A is what holds them down, holds them back. Unless Proposal A is repealed, it's going to be forever. They will only be able to have incremental increase over what the cost of living is, and they'll never get back to what their real taxable value is. You've all seen how passionate the supporters of libraries are when you just talk about possibly not going for 4 years. I mean, on the millage versus 2 years. So if you can convert that energy statewide, talking to legislators, might be able to turn the tide away from the Chamber of Commerce's pressure being placed upon the legislators.
Dennis?
Yeah.
We seen what happened when we talked about changing the millage, for roads and that, when we were thinking about that, the letters and the phone calls. So if they could use that energy in this library and pass it on to all the other libraries to do the same thing, I think we could make a difference, so.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's a good way to go back with her, Lynn, and tell her we'd love to sit down with them and share some ideas.
Okay.
Liquor law enforcement is a piece of the general fund budget, and basically what that is revenues that come from the liquor inspections that the sheriff's department does. It's relatively small, and that transfers basically into the general fund.
Only transferred when they do the inspections, isn't it?
Say again?
Only transfers when they do the inspections?
Well, basically transfers at budget time. It goes into that line item, and then it's transferred to the general fund. Yep. Timing, I'm not sure Lois could answer the timing question. Do you do that? Do you do, every time you get them, you do the allocation? Or is it, yeah. Township improvements, primarily township improvements is where we fund our major activities like road improvements and things such as that. And what you're seeing there is the collection of the millage primarily in 442,881.5 is the collection of the Werner Road millage. And our 50,000 that we put in for assistance to roads. And that's basically it. So it's basically a net zero budget, in and out budget.
And I will say that I'll pass along that George LeBlond earlier this evening talked about the $50,000 that the township has put into road improvements over the years, and he said, you know, it's been stagnant at $50,000 for, you know, quite some time. He said, you know, when the SEV was, you know, $97 million at the time that the $50,000 was decided on. If it had grown exponentially with the SEV, we would probably be putting away $350,000 a year towards roads.
True.
And I think it's a valid point, but at the same time, you know, you look at the changing environment of how we've spent money on roads, and we've put it in through a millage. Should we have maintained road improvements as a kind of a percentage of what of the SEV as we move forward?
If we owned our own roads, yeah.
Right.
I think we would have thought of that.
Well, it's even simpler than that. It was a specific board action that designated $50,000 a year, period. Bang. That was it. Said you will budget $50,000 a year. So that's why it's never changed. The board's never changed that direction.
And
But,
you know,
but it does, go ahead.
$50,000, you know, doesn't go
Don't go
very
very
far
far.
anymore for us, you know, but we've also had the road millage, so it's not like we haven't done anything. We've asked voters to approve a millage for specific roads as we move forward, so we have been putting, you know, without taking it out of our general fund or operation millage. And I can see his point in one way, but, I mean, Lynn's point is very valid, you know, when we're looking at it as our operating millage, times are tough and things are tight, and it's tough to allocate those funds.
In essence, what that fund is a petty cash fund for road repairs, and where the way we've used it is when we need the road commission to come and do something, you know, like last winter when we were having, where Commerce crosses 41 and goes down to 492, or near the new auto zone. There are two major drains there that kept freezing up this year, and they were flooding. All the sand was running off into the Badger Creek, so we had them come periodically and get the ice out of those drains, you know, and that's how we paid for that. Those are the kinds of things we use that $50,000 for.
That's for a road sweeping also comes out of?
It came out 2 years ago. It came out of there when we had the road, the $3,500, I think it was, for sweeping, came out of that $50,000. That's what we use that for, is kind of a petty cash fund for roads.
But I think if you go back when 50,000 was allocated, the road commission did have funds back at that point in time.
They did, yes.
This
It was
was
more of
just-
a matching fund,
This,
right?
this was just an additional for the township
Yeah.
to do what they want, because the road commission was able to do things.
That's correct. That was probably,
Couple
that was
years.
probably 8 years ago, maybe even longer than that. Might even be 10 years ago when the board took that action. And then the only other one, basically, that I'll draw attention to is one at the very back of your budget book, the Metro Authority. It's actually treated as a utility, but it generally flows through the general fund. And what that is a, I'll call it a tax, for lack of any other word, that the state put on to allow local governments like townships to maintain rights-of-way. For instance, we used some of that money back when Pete was talking with the fire department about the purchase of the Wildland fire truck. They suspended the $20,000 for 5 years, I believe it was, and then we made up the difference out of the Metro Authority fund because they used that to fight fires, wildland fires along the right-of-ways, power lines, and, you know, the gas pipelines and things such as that. That's what this fund is intended for, is that kind of maintenance along public right-of-ways, utility right-of-ways that go through the township.
So the money isn't just disappearing into general operations.
No.
It stays in that fund balance and gets used when something.
Correct.
And how is the amount calculated? Is it a percentage of something that?
The state sends it to us, basically. They do the calculation based upon the fees that they get for the the licensing of the right-of-ways, and it comes to us from the state. We're not involved in the calculation at all, and if we didn't take it, they would simply give it to someone else. It's just one of those state programs that,
They set it up and then send the money to the municipalities.
that's exactly it. And then they put strings on how it can be used, and the strings are, it has to be used to maintain a public utility right-of-way running through the jurisdiction. And other than that, that's general fund.
I will, we do not have Chief Sims here to answer questions, but I know that for his fire budget, I just wanted to bring to the attention of Ernie and Diana from last night that I'd brought up a question for Chief Sims, and I wanted to get you guys these copies, but I meant to do it last night, and I didn't. I will make you copies of this and give them each you at the immediate end of this meeting this evening. But I just, for one of the questions I had for Bob last night has to do with that public fire protection and the contribution, the $20,000 contribution that he makes to the public water system for public fire protection. Superintendent Page has been asking us for, this is the 6th budget cycle now where, they don't pay the full amount. And in my conversations, when I sat down with Kirk this year to go through his budget, said, the biggest problem, you raise that every year, but the biggest problem is there's no facts, there's nothing I can put my hands on. I don't have the dollar amount to be able to say, okay, I understand, what is it? I mean, is it 20,000? Should it be less? Should it be more? And he shared this information with me, and this came from the water rate studies. I won't go through the whole thing, but the bottom line here, the last one that was completed was in 2001. It was for the public fire protection. Talks about how you set aside the money and basically the additional capability built into the water system for fire protection service is where they track this. Then in 2001, the rate consultants had put the fire protection gross allocated costs of $76,257 was the cost of fire protection that are borne by the water department. And so that contribution is supposed to be towards that. All I brought up was that what that means is, and I had Dulcie go through, and in today's dollars, just using inflation factors from 2001 at that amount and what that would look like in today's dollars would be $103,612.50. So my question to Bob was, what happens if the board asks you to come up with another $83,612.50 to make that contribution to the water system, which is the actual cost of public fire protection that's being pushed on there? And is it fair for us to ask water customers to make up that additional $83,000? Because otherwise, look at my situation in my house, I'm on the water system, I'm on township water. None of my surrounding neighbors are on township water. That means I'm subsidizing through my water rates that additional $83,000 cost for public fire protection, yet I receive the same fire protection as each of my neighbors who just pays the 2.5 mils. And, I'm sure Bob was a little nervous that I'm asking him to pull out $83,000 out of his budget. And I think that would be hard to do, but I think as a board that we have to honestly look at it and say, it's no different than we were concerned with Kirk not being able to make the $12,000 contribution from wastewater to the general fund this year. And should that be $12,000? And where's the logic behind the amounts that we're offsetting? Number one, we should be doing a cost of service study, which was Manager Gerard's recommendation across the board. But I think it's important that we as a board, and you guys weren't here for this, and that's, like I said, Bob's not here to answer questions. I don't want to jump back into the fire department budget necessarily, but I wanted you guys to at least hear what my contention was, and again, I'll provide you with this information. But let's be honest with it then, and let's tell folks that if, that's what we are doing as a board, that, I don't know how most municipalities handle it. Do they hide some of the cost of fire protection within their water rates? I don't know the answers to that question. But if the actual true cost is $103,000 a year for public fire protection that gets borne by the water department, and we're only having the fire department's budget be $20,000 towards that, is that fair? Maybe we should have them pay the entire cost out of the 2.5 mils of $103,000, lower the water rates for the water rate customers, because it would in effect lower rates if he was given that full contribution, and then be honest about what our fire protection costs us. Do we need to adjust the millage for fire protection? Is 2.5 mils enough? But I want that, to be on the forefront this year, because no matter how we do it, I think as long as we're honest, and we've been talking about it for 6 budget cycles. Like I said, for me, I never had an actual dollar figure from Kirk. He would allude to it that 20,000 wasn't enough. And for 5 years, we didn't collect it at all because the board made a decision that the fire department needed a new truck, and therefore they would stop the contribution to the general fund for 5 years. And we reinstated it a couple years ago and brought it back at that $20,000 rate. Now, Bob told us last night that he doesn't believe that the fire department should pay anything towards the water department contribution.
I understand it.
And of course he's going to be protective of his budget, but he doesn't believe that they should pay they shouldn't pay anything. Personally, I disagree. I think that we need to be honest about what our fire protection costs us. I mean, he said, well, Kirk can raise his rates, and he has throughout the years, but I only collect my 2.5 mils. And then I'll point out that, let's go back to the history of the SEV in 1998, when our SEV was $94,491,000, and he was collecting 2.5 mils. Well, in 2014, it's $275,623,500 at 2.5 mils. And while you're not capturing all of that,
We don't cut back any of that.
right, you're still capturing it. You talk about raising rates, 2.5 mils on 94 million or 2.5 mils on 275 million. The fire department's budget has increased exponentially as our SEV has gone up. Bob pointed out that, we used to do 80 runs a year, and now it's 280 runs a year. I get it. We have a very highly visible department. We're a growing community. I'm not saying that they didn't deserve that money, but let's be honest to the folks and say, if this is what we're going to do, and we're going to leave that cost of fire protection, public fire protection, in water rates, let's make sure that people understand that this board has made a conscious decision that the fire department is not going to pay that full amount towards the water department, and then make that decision so that every year we don't have to hear this vague, Kirk says, I'm not getting my full amount. Bob says, I don't think I should pay anything. And we're kind of always been, 20 seems fair. My recommendation is that this year it's time for that rate study again. And Kirk's like, why don't we do it again like we used to? They used to do it every 3 years, and they would say, here's the actual cost of public fire protection on this water department. If that's the case, then let's know what it is and act accordingly. And if we decide it stays there, hey, the board can decide it stays there. I'm not saying that that's the wrong thing. And maybe most municipalities do that. I don't know that answer either. We'll find that out from the MTA. I'm sure we can do some work here. But I didn't know if you guys have ever seen this number. I don't know, Ernie, you were back in the boards in those days. If you'd ever seen this number.
That came in after that. If you look at the date, what was the date?
This was from 2001.
That was after I was on the,
And he had one from 1997. I don't know if you were on then or not.
yes.
In 1997, it was $71,339. And so I don't know that if we were doing it and it was never getting to the board for budget discussions or policy discussions, I mean,
I don't remember, to be honest with you, I don't. But I think to look at fire protection, what is fire protection when you say that? I think that's the key to the whole thing, and that too. What is that?
and a lot of what they talk about, the rate consultants talked about, is that you know, from a cost recovery standpoint, a direct charging for public fire protection has a lot to do with when a water system's constructed, the mains, the storage tanks, the pumps are all sized to permit flows capable of handling not only general service needs, but then fire flow capability. So as we develop our system and it gets built with that fire flow capability in mind, you don't always have to use it. In fact, you hope you never have to use it, but you still have to design and build a system with that in mind. And that's where some of that allocation comes from. And then the obvious, more fire hydrants, that kind of thing. But each business that we do, comes in and gets developed has fire protection built in. We charge a permit fee for it. Does that get included? Would that come off this number? The inspection fee, I don't know that answer either.
I don't have any with that. So I think if you look back in time, when you talk about new construction, it was always putting in the right size pipes in and the actual fire hydrants in, and Public Works did it because they were doing it. I don't think the discussion ever went into the direction that you're going at this point in time. It was just one of those things that was done, and that's where it ended up with. And that's where the costs came from and the payments came from.
Okay. So they talk about this fire protection cost becomes a part of the utilities rates, and frequently this charge is billed, to the municipality. Would it be better to be collected through property tax rather than through the sale of water? And I think that was the point of doing it with the 2.5 mils for fire protection, that it's used for fire protection and prevention. And that's why saying, hey, it's 2.5 mils and that's what we collect constantly. Well, when the rate consultants come back and say, yeah, well, your actual cost to your water customers is $103,000, is it fair? Well, some municipalities, everybody's on the water system. So is it fair? Yeah, probably, because everybody's connected. But in our situation, everybody isn't connected. So should a township water customer pay more for fire protection than the guy next to him who's not on the water? I don't know.
I don't know either.
But that's something that as a board, at least, we should have policy, or we should be very clear about it, that we say, and maybe this year we can't change it. I don't know that we can pull $83,000 out of, I told him last night, well, what's your fund balance? He said $180,000. I'm like, well, not anymore. Now it's 97. But it's kind of like, do you pull it out of fire right now, or do we address it through policy and make a conscious decision about how is it handled? What do we do? I don't think it's ever been done by a board in this township, and I think it should be addressed. This may be this might be the appropriate way to handle it. Maybe other municipalities handle it this way.
I don't know.
What started in 1998, as we look back, since 1998, you got, 17 years of deduction. Started at 15,000, went to 20,000. 5 years, they didn't pay nothing, now it's up to 20,000. And so we really need a rate study of some sort to tell us if it's just or not. Do we put a millage, do we put millage on for running our public works department? We'd have an increase every year as long as the township grows.
Well, they had, back in 1997 when they were addressing this in their narrative, they were talking about the proposed rate set for public fire protection at an annual amount of $15,000 is only 25% of the level indicated by the cost study. In '83, it was only $7,000, which was 12% of the cost. So they kind of talked about it through the years that the board's decision has always been that it's going to go through the volume rate for metered customers. And at that time, they were saying that if you increase it like from $10,000 level to $15,000, like they were recommending at that time, it would still only be 25% of the actual cost, and the volume rate for metered customers would be decreased by 7 cents per 1,000 gallons. So that's the kind of impact. We struggle so much sometimes on that public works budget where we anguish over, man, we don't want to raise rates, 11 cents per 1,000 or, all these over the years. And yet, in the meantime, we've had fire protection built in there that we've never really addressed. You want to lower water rate, lower the gallon rate for customers, we can do that. I mean, for a business like Lynn's, that would have a huge impact, taking that out of there on a per 1,000 gallon charge. You know, but is it the right thing to do? I don't know, guys. I'm only, for the first time in 6 budget cycles, getting this information from Kirk as we're having the conversation. I'm like, if we did it, he's like, if we had a number, he goes, well, we used to do it, and he pulls these out and says, here, this is what it was back in then. I'm like, why didn't you give me these 6 budget cycles ago? This would have been very helpful. But I think at least, do we want to do a cost of service study? Should that be something we're budgeting? How much is that going to cost? Can we do it as part of that rate, or should we expand it even more, like Randy had suggested, and talk about what's the contribution, you know, from to the general fund?
I think on the other side, you're talking about doing a cost of service study and taking additional dollars from the fire department. I think we also have to look at a study of some time with the fire department as to where their funds are going and what they need now and into the future and how they're planning, because they have gigantic expenses when they have to have them and that. So that's something else, and you said 190,000 in fund balance. Now, what is that setting there for? Is that just setting there, or is that?
Equipment and vehicles is what Bob said.
that.
Okay,
Yeah.
for.
But we have nothing down in writing, like we have Kirk do it, we spell it out by generators and all this other thing, we should have that, so we know what we're talking about.
And it will be in the CIP
Yep, with our new CIP that we're moving
next
to.
year.
Right.
I think that's what Bob indicated when we were talking, that the new CIP would lay out all this, so.
Well, some of my arguments was that, the way I looked at it, when I emailed Bob and I told him, I said, it looked to me like it was a loan. All right, you go back and, so many years been paying, and all of a sudden, they need a truck. Well, for 5 years, we collected nothing. Well, last year, Kirk had a bad winter. They got behind because they're always on frozen pipes and stuff like that. So I looked at that, basically at the same thing. The fire department, we give the fire department 5 years of not expending it. Now Kirk needs it. Now everyone's getting all excited about, well, we can't do that, we can't do this, But he's under the same circumstances. He needs new trucks. He needs a couple new guys to get caught up on all the work. You got people thinking about, might retire. I mean, age group, you look at that. But he said, no. Well, to me, if you look at this schedule here, it looks like we give him a loan for 5 years. Now, does Kirk get it back? The road commission, that's the way they operate. You take something from one road commission for 1 year, you don't need, you get it back. They fight for it to get that back. Why can't we do it there? And that's where I came up with that, because I went to the road committee meeting, and I seen it in action. So to me, if you look at this thing, and you're welcome to look at it, since 1998, 5 years, nothing, to me, that looks like a loan. Well, why can't we do the same thing for Kirk now? Take some back, maybe up at 40,000 for this year, or something like that. Maybe we can't do it at all this year, but we have to do something. We need that rate structure so we can do it the following year, so we don't come back here and say, well, we can't pay it again, So, I believe with Ernie, maybe we should have a study of the departments and, have it done.
Because it gives us a better idea as to what's happening on everything in that. I'm nothing against Bob. I think they do a fantastic job trying to do the planning.
Yep.
Once you get someone else in there to look at it, and they may concur with them 100%. This is the way.
Well, the people who do the studies, they got a variable from everybody, and that's what their job is.
The biggest thing is our growth factor here. We got a lot of unknowns in that. And so is Bob. He's trying to figure out what's going to happen, what they're going to need 2 and 3 years down the road, because it's not buying a $50,000 vehicle. You may end up having to pay a $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 vehicle, and it may be that we don't need it. Who knows?
So I didn't mean to, jump back in, and Bob's not here to defend the department or, stir up a hornet's nest, but because you guys weren't here, and it was a real good conversation last night. I think tonight's has been really good. It's kind of as a board, where do we go? And we may find that other municipalities have, they say in 2001, it is becoming common for municipalities to require fire protection-related costs to be recovered as part of normal water rates. Does that mean that other municipalities are saying, yeah, we capture a certain amount of public fire protection in our water rates? Well, if that's what we've been doing, and if that's what we continue to do, fine, but let's do it consciously so that we can defend it if somebody asks us. And when Kirk says, I don't get my full contribution, we say, we understand, but our policy is that a certain amount of public fire protection gets captured in water rates, and here's why we believe that it's okay. Maybe it's because we think that, the 2.5 mils, in addition to 2.5 mils, some of it gets picked up in water rates because, fire protection is better for the township, increases taxable value, something. I mean, but if it's conscious, if the board can consciously say, this is why we do it, then I'll feel better about it. And then we can give Kirk an answer at budget times when he says, why don't I get my full reimbursement? At least we should be able to answer him as a board.
A cost allocation study will give you that kind of data.
Right.
It'll bring you back the rationale and give you several options to consider.
Well, we may find out how much it costs to do a cost allocation study. And have to raise rates to pay for the study. It might not be a great idea. I mean, at
Well,
this
we can
point.
split it 3 ways, though, too.
Right.
We should have an idea pretty quickly. There's a firm that is pretty widely used. It used to be known as Maximus, which is now MGT of America, out of Bay City. The county uses them. A lot of other entities use them for allocation studies and fee-for-service studies and things such as that. And I did get in touch with their local manager, basically, who covers this area, and he's putting together a proposal for us. Gave him a copy of the audit, the budget, those kinds of things, so he has an idea of how big we are and what services we have and how our budget's set up. So I suspect we'll have something from him fairly quickly. Give us an order of magnitude idea of what the cost might be.
So what we have to decide then, before December, when we approve this, is whether or not we leave the 20,000, if we take it out, if we increase it, and probably try to budget for whatever this cost study's gonna be, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think, like I said, it might be real hard to change it in this budget cycle right now when where we're at in the budget cycle. It might be really hard for us to, if we came up with the idea that, yeah, it's not fair, we gotta take $83,000 out of the fire department budget. That's a tough call in November to tell Bob that he's got $83,000 less. I don't think it's fair to Bob, to be honest with you, to the fire department as a whole. I just don't think you do that to somebody 2 months before the budget cycle starts, that you say, by the way, you have $83,000 less than you think you do, when you're already budgeting with the idea that you might have $47,000 less than you should because of the tax tribunal challenges.
And we don't know actually that the 103 is,
Yeah, we'd be leaving him with 60 left. I mean,
we don't know that the 103 is actual either.
we don't, because again, that was based on, I only had her do it with the only what we could do is with the inflation factors. But that it could be $50,000 more or $20,000 less. I mean, we don't know. It's probably a pretty good ballpark for, our best guesstimate. Looking at what it was in '97, looking at what it was in 2001, I know it's at least 75,000 or 76,000. Clerk Terry?
Since '97, our water system has grown, and I would expect that it won't go down, it'll go way up.
Yeah.
Because there's lots more hydrants out there than there used to be. And a lot of this is predicated on hydrants and everything. And you're right, Dennis, in your area, that is an issue where you have non-water customers and water customers kind of right next to each other. Trowbridge Park, I don't see that it's not most everyone in Trowbridge Park's on water in most of the subdivisions. So that's not a really big issue there. But up like on Eagles Nest Road and, north, there's no water up there. So, I know we addressed with Bob trying to get a pumping station up there also last night, which would be in the CIP. But, so yeah, there's some interesting questions we have to get answers to and come to a conclusion with. I would say right now, that's probably a 2015 board issue. We have another 2 months to debate this, but The extra 2% increase this year, I think, would be equitable, at least in my opinion, for this year. And then we go forward into next year, see where the real costs are. And, you know, we might drop that down if we do increase that spending. So, you know, we do have, like I said, we do have another 2 months to deal with this. So we are kind of ahead of the time, but I do agree with Dennis. We can't really ask the fire department to take that much money out of their budget right now. And as the budget sits right now, it is a balanced budget. So, you know, maybe we do that this year, and then with the new CIP for next year and the cost of service study, and if we do start our budget again at this time, I think we've done a good job with the time because we're pretty much through it right now. So, but those are my comments, and I guess I just didn't see what the rest of the board would have to say.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. That's good comments. I think it's real common sense. I mean, we don't have time to fix it this year. We just don't.
The board's gonna have to come to an agreement that the fire services, or whatever you wanna call it, is the part of the water, and it's funded by the actual rate people, or is it spread out to come up with? That's a decision the board's gonna have to come up with for that. And once you can get to that point, then the other things will start falling into place.
And it may not be something that you can change in 1 year. It might be a phased-in approach when you're talking to that kind of money too. I mean, to adjust the budget and allow the SEV growth to help you make that transition, to balance it out.
And a lot of things, the tax tribunal is gonna have a big play in it, as to
Right.
what the future's gonna be.
Yeah, that's a good point. So here we are. We've gotten pretty much through the entire budget. Like I said, we got 2 months ahead of us, well, 6 weeks ahead of us before we do the truth and taxation and all that stuff. What is the board's pleasure on moving forward? The next thing that we would get into here is the fee structure, unless somebody has another idea of where they want to go, but I'm thinking that it's the one part of the budget that we saved for last, because it's always good to save the best for last.
The more interesting portion to the last, right?
Yeah, exactly. But you know, do we want to move? Do we want to schedule a meeting for moving into next week? Do you want to hold off till the November meeting? I mean, what's?
I would suggest if we do have the next board meeting is the night prior to election night, that would not be a good meeting to have anything. I would like to have that meeting done as soon as possible. Someone has to be here at 6 in the morning the next day, so. And other people do also, so that would probably be not a good meeting to have run extended. So I would say either next week or after the election would be good for myself.
What's the board's consensus? Would you like to have one evening next week?
I would rather do that than do it
Yeah.
the night of the board meeting. 'Cause
Well, yeah, and I think we need to decide before 3 weeks.
Okay.
And I think Kirk needs to come in, and we need to kind of figure out if we're going to approve his budget as it stands and where that affects with what the effect's going to be on the 20,000.
What's looking like a good day next week? Monday the 27th?
It's fine.
Monday the 27th is okay? Randy? Would you be available?
I'll be here at 4 o'clock. Yeah, I'll be available that evening.
Okay.
I'll be here for the machine testing at 4, so. And that only takes about a half hour to 45 minutes at the most.
Do we want to do a 5 to 7?
5 to 7?
Yeah, that would be okay.
And we'll be picking it up with the fee schedule. Yep, if somebody wants to probably make that motion.
Well,
when
we have
come
to
out of the
Come out of the forum
discussion.
first, yeah.
And Dan will be back by,
Yeah.
Yep.
And I believe, I'm not sure, but I believe the fire department, I don't know if they have a meeting that night or if that's their training night. I guess if Dan can maybe break away at least for an hour, maybe that would be good. Fire department,
Dan's in that.
Is that a meeting Monday nights?
I know they meet Monday nights. I don't
it's
know what.
Monday nights, but I'm not too sure if that's.
Well, if Dan can, if he can break away for maybe just an hour, if that's, maybe he
Yep.
can just break away for an hour.
I thought it was at the beginning of the month too.
Okay, well, I know they have an officers meeting, and I don't know when
They have
that
two
is. and-
meetings. One's an officer, and then they have one in the beginning of the month.
Okay. Well, let's,
So. 27th?
So
if
you
there's
did-
nothing else for tonight on the forum discussion, I would suggest we come out of the forum discussion and then somebody make the motion to schedule the meeting for,
I make a motion, we schedule the next budget session on Monday, October 27th
I'll second that.
at 5 to 7, and the topic will be fee structure.
I'll still second it.
if there's no board member comment, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. And one more motion this evening for adjournment.
So moved.
Motion support to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We are adjourned.
At
Keep it to yourself.